What's up, tribe? Thank you for being here and welcome to my channel. Today's post is titled Logical and Illogical. And as it's a dialogue between Matias and his higher self, I'll be referring to Matias as me and to his higher self as I am. Me. The week of the physical body begins in the month of the constellation of Libra. And when thinking inside the pyramid on what things we should work on today, I could see the image of a human body crossing its information from one cerebral hemisphere to another. Everything, the wiring of what makes us think, feel, do. It reminded me of the image I decided to put in this post. The two hemispheres of the brain, right and left, each supported by a god, that of the sun, Horus, and that of the moon, Thought. Day and night, the visible and the invisible, the man in the middle, receiving the blessing of both gods in the form of water of life and power, and both waterfalls crossing each other. To the left of the person is Horus, the light, the sun, the logic, the visible and tangible of the external world, the objective, that from its source of energy nourishes its opposite side on the right, bathing the entire right side of man from head to feet, and to his right, thought, the moon, the night, the illogical, the imagination, the subjective, the internal world, the invisible and intangible, nourishing with his water of life the entire left side of man, from his head to the feet. Unlike the image of the balance that we saw in the emotional one, the physical body shows the interconnection of the two sides in a much more practical way. They are not two opposites that seek balance between their weights, but they are two systems that are interconnected in networks, which one depend on the other to function. The right hemisphere of the brain controls the left side of the body, while the left hemisphere controls the right side. I have learned throughout life that people interpret the right hemisphere as illogical, the creative, the feminine, while the left side is the logical, analytical, and masculine. But what is really logic and illogic? How can they be part of the same system? If in their words they basically indicate that one of them implies the absence of the other. I am. Both contain the same word, logos, which comes from the Greek and means thought, idea, argument, reason, and principle. The concept eikos at the end of the word means related to. The letter I comes from in, which refers to no, the lack or denial of something. Therefore, logical is that which is related to the thought and the idea, while illogical is that which is not related to the thought or idea. Me. And what would that be? I am feeling, emotion, impulse, parasympathetic and unconscious action. Me. What an elaborate way to put it. Wouldn't it be easier to look up the word feeling? I am. That is the word synesthesical from the Greek syn aesthesis, with the sensation, logical and synthetic. Refer to the two ways the universe works, by pulse and impulse. The pulse arises from an initial energy, which originates everything. That force is a perception in existence. Everything that exists does so by a pulse of perception. This idea led the ancients to the logic that everything that exists does not exist by itself without the idea of what it is. And the only thing that can shape that idea is logical thinking, a mind capable of generating connection concepts until clarity. For this reason, he thought, for the whole cosmos to have logic, then, it is inevitable to think that there is a mind that unites everything, giving it order. And he soon came to the conclusion that there could not be a being outside of that whole that contained the mind to give logic, since it would imply that its connection was based on other higher mental logic. That is to say, that the final point to understanding that gives meaning and order to all existence is not a being thinking, but the thought itself. It is the mind. Me, the first universal law. I am the only universal law. Well, all others are born from it. Thus, the scholars of the teaching of thought, whom the Greeks called Hermes, began to become known as those related to the god Hermes, the Hermetics. This group was a closed circle of scholars who began to call the universe as the mind, the idea, just as Plato did when studying Hermes. The world of ideas, in Greek, this made it understood that everything that exists is a thought. Water is an idea. The earth is a concept. The sky is a thought. The stars are ideas. Animals are ideas. The gods are ideas. This gave rise to the concept of the Logos as a philosophical divinity. The Logos and its different logos are the ideological divinities that have given logic to existence from the mind, the pulse of creation. Me and the drive? I am. It is the reaction generated from the idea. Like when you come up with an idea and you launch yourself to express it, then it will be time to review. Was it the correct one? It worked? What do I get from it? Me, integrated. I am. And the way to do it is with sensations. The sensations are something new for the mind, because the mind tries to interpret that which comes back to it, tries to shape it. The impulse is the reaction to the pulse of the mind, but it is something that returns in a different form, like a distorted echo in a strange and deep cavern. The mind has a hard time interpreting the feeling it has created and tries to catalog it, to understand it. Thus, the philosophers understood that everything that was not directly from the Logos, but a sensory reaction from him, would be called illogos, that is to say, illogical, the hidden, the invisible, what cannot be understood, what must be felt. Me, the five senses. I am. These senses gave a new sense to the mind. They allowed the unit to understand its potential. Like someone who changes his mind after experiences, not because he understands them, but because he lived them. I am the experience, the living to believe, is one of the basic structures between the sensory world and the mental world, between the illogos and the logos. If the universal mind was the pulse for the creation of ideas and thoughts that designed the meaning of existence, It is existence, life that will give a new meaning to what the mind has created through impulse. Me. So the universe is mental, but inevitably needs the physical impulse to be able to decode the mind through emotion. I am symbiosis. As flowers need bees to create honey, the spirit needs the body to generate soul. There is the balance of both, the connection, the divinity. Me. And why do the two cerebral hemispheres then divide the tasks between them and intersect their functions with the body? I am like the North Pole and South Pole, with their hemispheres on the Earth's sphere. The brain also needs a magnetic balance to balance its functions. Everything in the universe is polar in order to create. However, do you divide the planet into trees above and deserts below? Me, no. Everything is interconnected. There are trees and deserts in both hemispheres. There is cold and heat in both. There are seas in both. I am, because the division is not literal, it's subtle. Of course, in the south of the planet, there's more water, more oceans, which shows you that the south embodies the right hemisphere, creative, while in the north there's more land, which shows more the visible, logical, and left hemisphere. But they both interact. The cold and warm ocean currents exchange information by crossing each other under the seas. This allows for balance throughout the body. Thus, the distribution is balanced. That both hemispheres interact in this way generates greater capacity for reaction and coordination when it comes to moving in a third-dimensional physical world. Me. So when you say the cable's crossed, to refer to when one goes crazy, actually, that the cables are crossed is the key to balance. I am, therefore, beyond the apparent duality of our bodies. Such duality does not exist in terms of connectivity, the coordination and balance that we achieve by jumping, walking, running, turning, listening, dancing, interacting with the environment. All of this is thanks to the body's ability to exchange logical and illogical information. Me. So what you're saying is that logical people need illogic in order to discover the foundations of their logic. I am. The key to all science is imagination. You cannot describe without imagining. You cannot develop without visualizing the non-existent. The word would be no logic without sensation, without synesthesia. And on the other hand, there would be no synesthesia, the illogical, the inexplicable, without the ability of the mind to open itself to the possibility of the sensory and strange expressing itself. For in the end, everything inexplicable is part of the imagination, and the imagination is an idea born of the logos. Me, I have heard that there are people who call the logos as the devil, as a macabre being that controls existence. I am. If it is what your illogic makes you feel about the logos, then you will live that aspect. The historical reason why some may know the logos as something diabolical is always the same, the church. Just as they called free thinkers heretics, magicians and scientists were called sorcerers, priestesses and alchemists were called witches, other religions were called pagans, and fertility ceremonies were called riots. Also the hermetics were called devil. Obviously, his god Logos would be Satan. Me. Sure. I am semantics and history. Me. So in order to find balance in my life, I must understand that I live between the logical and the illogical as a way of constructing realities. I am. There is no other way. The greatest force for transformation in the world is imagination. Imagination is the logical mind giving the illogical a tool to build your dream into reality. Me. So I shouldn't be afraid of living in a story in my imagination, but rather dare to live my stories, my imagination, so that I can show that I can do the impossible. I am. You are the vivid dream of the universe. So dare to live your own dreams.